it through a little bit more. So we've got this thing called the step model, and the reason I've got someone on a slack rope walking across is actually the step model is a way of thinking about those conversations that we might think is a bit tricky. We can fall off these conversations. Yeah, we can either avoid them or we get we can get caught up in not doing them particularly well. So the step model, it was originally developed by the Center for Distance Management. So it's quite a researched model. They've used it. It's been sort of researched on how it works and the quality of it and the effectiveness, and how it's different. One of the models we've introduced in the coaching thing is this thing about grow, and Jonathan would have done that with you, and I know that some of you have been really using that, and grow. And rightly so, when you're doing your coaching practice, you are asking the person, what is it you would like to talk about? Yeah. So it's the real non-directive. What is it that you're bringing? What's your concern? What is it you want to look at it? The step model then starts to say, well, actually, what happens if there's a particular focus that you as the manager or head of department or head of subject want to talk about with that person? Yeah. So sometimes we might call these having, robust conversations about performance and about behavior. And it can sit alongside and integrate with a coaching approach. And it's useful when you're coaching someone where there's some accountability and maybe possible hierarchy. So you have managerial responsibility for them, or curriculum responsibility. So this step model has got 4 steps. Most things in coaching are either in a quadrant, a circle, or in 4 steps. I don't know why, but there you go. So this has got 4 steps. And the first step is about a statement. And this is where it's changing a little bit. So this isn't about the person who's being coached. This is about you as the person who is going to be coaching. You are introducing a statement that is describing something that you are observing or experiencing around behaviors or performance. Okay. The second bit is that you're testing out your statement. Okay, so you're making this statement, you're saying this is what I'm observing and this is what I'm seeing. So that might be, for example, you might have a particular sort of plan, or I can't remember the language you use now in schools, but you might have a particular plan that you're using for maths or English or something, yeah, or read and write or whatever, yeah. And what you're seeing is some people not using it in the way that you anticipated. Yeah, so you're observing that, you're seeing that. So that's what you're observing. But what you're doing is you're checking out that what you're seeing or have seen is what actually is happening. Yeah. So you're checking it out, because it might maybe just be that happened on one lesson that you observed, and there might have been a particular reason for it. Yeah. So you're checking out the validity of your statement through dialogue. Is this true for both people? Are there some other bits that need to be brought in by the other person? And then the third bit is then, when the statement's been tested, you've checked out, you're not making assumptions, and that you've got some agreement about, yes, this is what's actually happening. You take a coaching role to find ways forward. So that's where you're giving back full responsibility back to the other person. Yeah, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to work with you now as a coach to help you find out ways forward. And then again, just like with grow, you then get some agree or invite some actions and timescales for things that need to change. So let's talk that through a little bit more. So the topic, traditionally what you've been doing is, the topic in gold has been, you've asked the person you're coaching, what is it you want to be coached on? In this one, the topic, the focus is introduced by the coach or the manager. Okay. So it feels a little bit different. Okay. The second bit is this what we might call reality in the grow model, is this bit about the statement and the test. Yeah. So here's my reality as the coach or your manager, or you're the lead for the curriculum or whatever. This is what I'm seeing. This is my reality. Can I check that that's the reality that you're seeing and experiencing as well? Can we check that out? Can we have some dialogue around that? Okay. And then you at this bit, you are making this transition from maybe as a coach being a little bit more directive to then moving to being less directive. Yeah. So by the time you get into this bit about exploring, so you've had a conversation about the reality, then you're going into, okay, look, we've agreed on the reality. This is happening. How might you get to this different place that we need you to be? Okay. How might you get there? What are your choices? What are your options? So you're going into, you're stepping away from that being a bit more managerial and coming back into being really non-directive, asking them what it is, what choices they've got, and then same, keeping them with, what actions you're going to take and how you're going to do that. So coach and manager states the goal, introduces a statement. So ownership is with the coach and the manager. Then the ownership for reality starts with the manager, then becomes shared with the person being coached. So that's that transition starts to happen. And then the ownership for options is with the person being coached. Yeah, as is the ownership for the actions. Yeah, it's really important to make that transition. So you don't just say, this is what I'm seeing. Oh, we've agreed that that's what we're saying, and this is what you need to do about it, because all you're doing is taking ownership. Yeah, you need to give ownership back at that point. So the statement, for me, the bit that is the most important part of this is getting the statement right. Yeah. And the statement is often about a gap in performance or behavior. Okay. So here is this line represents, this is what I, as the head or the lead in this topic or this part of the curriculum or a SLT, this is what I and the organization are expecting. Yeah. And that might have been through CPD or introduction of a scheme. Yeah. So this is what I'm expecting. This is what I was expecting to see. This is what I'm expecting to see. Yeah. And then what I'm observing, or we observe together, or experiencing this way, is this. Yeah. So you're describing what you're seeing, and usually that's the gap. Yeah. So it's really important that that statement is clear. This is the gap. This is what I or we as an organization are expecting. This is what I am experiencing at the moment. And you're doing that testing, you're checking out, is that what they're experiencing? Are they seeing that? Okay. So that statement is really important. And crucial to this is a thing that I'm going to call truth telling. I'm going to really quickly go through this. It's on the website. And so one of the things that can happen in this statement is that we get a little bit, some of us might be thinking, I don't really want to, I want this person to like me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to maybe not be as truthful as I need to be. Yeah, I'm going to put a bit of spin on something. Yeah, so I'm going to make it a bit easier for that person to understand or hear. So I'm going to put, actually, no, it was all right. What you did was okay. It doesn't really matter if it didn't follow that plan like it was meant to. That's okay. Yeah, you're putting a bit of spin on it. What you really might want to say is, actually, you might be feeling, I'm as a SLT or a lead, I'm feeling uncomfortable about what I've seen, and you're acknowledging that you feel uncomfortable, and you're going to share that with the other person. You're saying, oh, I observed this and I felt a bit uncomfortable about that. So you're being really truthful. The other options are that you lie. So you go and watch someone and it's like, okay, what they're doing is contrary to what they need to be doing in terms of following a plan or managing behavior. And you say to them, oh no, what you did was fine. That was okay. Yeah. So you're actually, you're not being truthful to what you're experiencing, and you're not being truthful to them. And the other is that we put a bit of a spin on it. Yeah. A bit of a spin, or we withhold, we just don't say anything at all. Does that make some sort of sense? Yeah. So we have these three options that we have. Tell the truth that I'm aware of, what I'm observing, and I'm going to let that other person know. I can lie or put a bit of a spin on it, or I can withhold and not just say anything at all. Okay. And the reasons we'll do that are because sometimes we just don't want to, we want people to like us. We're a bit cautious about how they're going to react. Yeah. So we're not really clear about that statement. So what I'm going to ask you to do, right, and this is might send fear into some of you, but what I'm going to ask you to, I'm going to stop sharing for a minute, and I'm going to put you, well, I'm going to put you in pairs in a minute, but first of all, what I want you to do is to think of someone who you are working with, okay? Might be a peer, it could be someone who's part of the team that you're responsible for in terms of curriculum, or it might be you might be an SLT and you're managing someone, and there is a conversation that you would like to have with them about, maybe it's performance, or it's about behavior, or it's about adhering to a particular bit of curriculum. So just quickly think of someone. Yeah, try and get someone in your mind. Don't worry too much about what it is in detail, but or here's someone I'd like to have. I just really would like to say to that person, do you know what? This is what the school expects. This is what I see happening. Can we have a conversation about it? Yeah. So just give you a 30. What was that like for you to make that statement quite quickly, and get that feedback? What are your reflections and observations about what that was like, and what your learning was? And was your statement clear? Was it received as clear? Did you get feedback on? Did it help you think about how you might? It made it, oh yeah, we can have a dialogue about that feels safe because I know what we're talking about, or did it make the other person feel a bit defensive? So maybe a few responses from people about how that felt.
I'm just pulling into my other son's school, so I'm going to have to go.
Okay, cool. All right.
Sorry.
That's all right. Cheers, Laura.
With Hannah and I and Laura were in the call, and we said it was quite hard to always think, because you didn't have very much time with the wording, but yep. Obviously we sort of started with the statement of it was quite helpful thinking about, this is the school policy, or this is the whole school view of the statement, to give that what is the reality of what it should be like, rather than this is what I do.
Okay.
The whole school, these are the Rose and Shine principles, or this is our behaviour policy here at Pegasus. So we found that quite helpful as a starting block.
Yeah.
And then we said, doing the gap we found easier. This is because then we started with, this is what we should see. Yep. This is what we're not seeing at the moment. We did discuss something that we thought might be quite tricky. Was mine was linked to something to do with behaviour.
Yeah.
And what would happen if the other person's reality is not the same as your reality?
Yep.
That they don't see that they're doing that. Yep. And then that would be then moving forward, might become quite tricky.
Yeah. So I think two things I've heard there. Something about using the school policy, or the school, something to do with the school, makes it feel a bit safer. This isn't about me personally. This is about the school, what the school's expecting. So that feels like it makes it safe. I think the second bit about it is it is tricky. It is tricky. So you might have to spend a little bit of time thinking about that checking out the statement, and the bit about testing quite often is about facts and feelings. Yeah. So if you're going to go into this conversation, you might want to just do a bit of preparation about, okay, you've got some feelings about it, but what facts have you got? So if someone says, actually, well, I don't feel that. I don't feel it the same. I don't feel the same as you do about it. That you have got some observational facts around it. Well, this is what I see happening, X, Y, and Z. So again, you're trying to move it so it's a bit objective. So I would do a little bit of preparation. Yeah, and maybe thinking about what happens if this person sees it differently than I do. Yeah, what am I going to do? Natalie?
Yeah, that was really interesting. So I started off by saying I've noticed that.
Yeah.
Started off with what I've been seeing. I said, actually, the expectation we have is that. So then it kind of highlights where the gap is.
Yeah.
And I said, how are you feeling? Is everything okay? Because again, it's understanding that kind of narrative that might be going on underneath.
Yeah.
And then I said, is there anything that you feel that I can do to support? So putting the ownership back onto the person.
Yep.
And then that sort of then I listened to Jess after that.
Okay. So you found it a useful process.
Yes, definitely. I mean,
Yeah.
the only kind of pinch point for me is what response I'm going to get back, and how then, if it is kind of a prickly exchange,
Yeah.
back to me, how to then diffuse that.
Yeah. Okay.
That
Yeah.
would be my next question.
Yeah. And I think that's a bit about where you're using your coaching approach as much as possible. Do you know what I mean? Because at that point, it can be quite easy to get a bit defensive. Do you know what I mean? As the manager, as a coach, and a bit frustrated. Oh, they don't see it different. They see it differently, and whatever. But actually, just to listen, yeah, just to take a deep breath and just listen, so, and to get their understanding of how they see it differently. Yeah. So I think it's important, yeah, to not to get defensive at that point, because it can be quite easily. If they get a bit defensive, we can get into the dance and we can get a bit defensive, as opposed to, no, just listen. Yeah, and almost say, oh, right, it sounds like you're seeing it differently than I am. Can we explore that a little bit? Yeah. Okay. And you might, and part of it is also, remember, you might have to adjust your view, because you might get some information from them that means you have to adjust it a bit. Your opening statement may not have been, as fully correct.
I think,
Lucy,
sorry,
go.
I think to clarify what I mean by that, it's not that I would get prickly back. I think
Yeah.
it would have the opposite impact on me. I'd shut down and I wouldn't.
Okay.
I would then stop the conversation because I wouldn't want to pursue it anymore.
Okay, yeah. So that's the bit, that's for you, maybe that's the point of actually just to be a bit brave and just stay with it. Yeah, yeah, because we can get into fight or flight. We get a bit of prickly back, we'll get a bit of fight or flight. Yeah, yeah. I'm aware that Lucy and Hannah put your hands up. No, all right. Oh, Lucy was just waving around or something. Okay, that's fine. All right, Hannah.
I although it was just a practice, and this is obviously like quite safe place to be practicing, I felt really anxious beforehand before doing my statement. I think because this approach feels slightly more confrontational, and I think it comes back to that wanting to protect people and not wanting to hurt their feelings, because it is an emotional profession. I think I was very concerned about bringing up a gap in someone's performance, because that's quite could result in quite an emotional response. Yeah.
So I think that's why it's really, and I think there's two bits. I think it's really important to acknowledge that. If for some of you may have looked on the website, there's a presentation around some different creatures. So there are 5 creatures. There's an ostrich, teddy bear, a shark, an owl, and a fox. Yeah, and they've come from some stuff around conflict resolution, and they're about different approaches or responses that people have to even the thought of doing something that has a bit of even potential confrontation to it. So it's probably worth going and having a look and just recognizing yourself in it. Yeah. And just think, okay, how might I want to just to adapt a little bit? So I would encourage you to go and have a look at that, because just to being really aware of your own responses, like you just said, Hannah, is really important, because that then starts saying, oh, okay, because what can happen is I feel a bit anxious about it. So actually, if it gets a little bit tricky, like Natalie was saying, we'll just leave it. But the problem is the behavior and the performance thing's probably not going to change. Mm-hmm. So in a month's time, you're going to have an even more difficult conversation. Yeah. Does that make sense? So it's almost like, it's okay to feel anxious about it, but acknowledge I'm feeling anxious because, and then thinking, okay, how can I make this as safe as possible for them and for me? Which I think is part of it. That's the preparation bit, is preparing. So what I'm going to ask you to do quickly now, we've got about a quarter of an hour, and I want you to have a go at this. I am going to ask you to think about the same statement, okay? But I'm going to let's give you 3 minutes, right, to craft it a bit, to hone it, right? Write it down, write some notes about it. As you're doing it, think about, all right, what am I avoiding saying here? What am I not saying? Am I putting a bit of spin on this? Am I saying this in a way that will make it easy for that person to engage? Yeah. and not get defensive. Yeah. So just write it down, hone it a little bit, think about it, so create this bit of a script. Okay, so we'll do that for 3 minutes, and I'm going to put you back into your pairs and have another go. So maybe just a bit of feedback, observations, responses to using that statement thing. Lucy?
We both obviously had amended what we said a lot, which was really positive, but we both failed to check the validity of what we'd said.
Okay.
We were like, this is the thing, this, and this, and then we were like, oh no, we need to like ask the other person. Otherwise it's going to be really like combative.
That's right, and that's really, so it's like, it's not, so you're trying to get this really delicate balance of, I'm going to be really clear, and firm at the start, but what I'm not going to do is exclude you. I'm not going to exclude you from this dialogue and this conversation. So that's really helpful. How about us, Natalie?
I started off by asking how they were, just to see if there's any underlying context. Then what I've noticed, are you aware that you're doing this? And then setting out the expectation, and then saying, is there anything that I can do to support you, or you feel you need? Okay.
So I think all those things are really important about, checking that there's some support and stuff. One of the things that just, Natalie, just being a little bit aware of and listen to you talk about is just being careful, because it's a really tricky balance. That's why I had that thing about walking on a tightrope, because sometimes what we can do is, in our desire to be supportive, we can be almost in language of transactional analysis, they talk about we can become marshmallow managers. We're so supportive and so wanting them to be all right that we actually fudge what we want to say. So we're just trying to get the balance so they're both really strong. So I'm really clear and I'm really supportive. So it's just making sure that we keep that balance right. So, okay, just where we've only got a couple of minutes left. So do you feel now that, so you can see the difference, okay, you can see the difference between when we were talking about this non-directive coaching, where you start with what is it you would like to talk about, and that can still be really relevant. You might do an observation, and you might say, what is it you would like to discuss around, what is it you'd like to explore a bit around what I've just observed, so you can still use that approach, so this doesn't replace using that non-directive, but it gives you a bit of choice, where you might think, oh, I've done that twice with that person who I'm observing, and they just haven't seen the gap themselves, they're not aware of it, so I might need to bring it, I might need to say, right, I'm going to start that conversation, I'm going to bring the topic, the focus, the goal bit, okay? So it just gives you a bit more choice, around it, okay? But it doesn't, one doesn't negate the other. They are both good choices, but it's a really helpful way, the STEP model, of structuring what we might seem as traditionally difficult conversations to have. But I would encourage you to just put your hand. Did you find it easier just to do the statement really quickly and just say it, or did you find it helpful to do that honing?
The second one I found much easier. It was, I had much more clarity on what I was saying.
Okay, just to be aware, for some of you, that the opposite might happen. But what you need to do is just say it. You've got your clarity, and actually what happens is, when you go to that more planned, what you do is you water it down, because then you start thinking, oh, I don't, or they might get a bit upset, or don't want to do that. So then we start to water it down. So just be cautious. Different ones might work, but they're two different approaches. But I would encourage you just to maybe experiment with that prepping before you go into conversation. Okay, we are coming to the end of this hour and a half. Thanks for engaging. Hope that was brought some use to you, and now you've got a bit of a framework that you can talk amongst yourselves, and you can expect. You might practice one of these in one of your coaching triads, so you might need to create a bit of a role play idea, but just so you can try it out, you might say to the other person, look, this is the context. I did this observation last week, and I really needed someone. And I've heard when I've been coaching people and I've watched observations, I hear people say, I need people to do what I'm asking them. Yeah, I need people to follow this. It's there for a reason. So you might say to the person you're coaching, look, can you just role play a little bit for me so I can try out using this step model? Yeah, so to try experiment a bit with it. Okay. Does that feel like an okay place to finish in this lovely virtual world that we have?
I know. Thank you, Rob. And I know that people have been on the training this morning virtually and back on this one. And I just would like to say to people, do try and stop and have a restful weekend, because I'm really conscious of how tiring it is. I can't believe how quickly this term's going. We've only got 3 weeks left. My goodness. And there's an inset day at the end of it all as well, so which we will not be asking you to do anything in. It's entirely going to be your day.
Oh, look, lots of smiles then, Harry.
I know. And they've got half a day in 2 Fridays' time as well.
Cool.
Keep going, folks. And do touch base with me. But I'd quite like to get around people and just see how they're finding the program at the moment, and talk about where we want to go from in January. But try and rest up, put your pens down, please. And I know you're saying, I've got all this to do. Just ask yourself, would it make a massive difference if I don't do anything now for the rest of the weekend?
Okay,
now looking at me again. You're going to laugh, Harry. And please, I have just folded all my stuff up and gone, enough's enough.
That's a great invite. I would as an outsider who's listened to you over the last few weeks, I would encourage you to take up Harry's invitation. However painful that might be for some of you. I can see some of you squirming about the thought of actually not doing anything over the weekend. But I would encourage you to do that. Okay. Lovely to see you all and work with you.
Thank you, Rob.
And see you again soon. Okay, thanks. Bye.
Take care.